That guy's gonna be some senator one day.
Let me tell you what, nothing greater, no greater feeling than being able to sip an ice cold cheerwine in a free country once again. Ladies and gentlemen, we are so back. Welcome back to another episode of the Jesse Hughes Show. We are so back. We've been living in the greatest country in the world, so it hasn't been acting like it, but it's back. We are so back. We've got a lot to talk about today. As you can see on my little thing down here, usually live on Fridays, but this weekend got a lot going on. And so we are starting a little bit earlier in the week than we usually do. And we are going to get into today's political issues. First and foremost, in case you missed it, Caroline Leavitt, the new White House press secretary, started her job yesterday at a press conference. It was amazing. It was really good. It was nice to see somebody sparring with the mainstream media. It was nice to see somebody who had a actual ounce of competence be able to talk to some of these people and answer their questions. And what was even better was that they announced that they are going to open up the White House press pool to independent creators, independent content creators, independent podcasters, independent journalists, people who don't have ties to the mainstream media. They're going to be opening that up. And in true fashion, because why the heck not, I decided to apply and haven't heard anything yet. It's probably going to take a while for these requests to get sifted through because I've seen all over Twitter where tons of independent creators, independent people are applying, getting their name out there, trying to see if they can get a spot in the White House press pool. Now, if I were to get it, it would probably not get used often. There would probably be other people that would end up in that seat because I'm in Lynchburg, Virginia most of the year. I am not in Washington, D.C. It's not like I can just drive up one day with law school and be like, hey guys, I'm here to do whatever. But if I got it, that would be fun. And it wouldn't go unused. I would find an excuse to go up to DC and use it because I've got it. Why not use it? So I'm excited to see if I can do that, if it's possible. And if not, then we'll figure something out. But I've seen tons of people who have applied, who have said that they're going to go up there, use this credential, hopefully. So we'll see what happens with that. But it's great to see that the president and his team know where the media landscape is headed, know what is coming forward. Mainstream old media is dying. The new media is taking over. Podcasts like this. Obviously, this isn't the hugest podcast in the world. This is just a college kid in his apartment bedroom talking into an iPhone. But, you know, we all got to start somewhere. And it's exciting to see what's coming down the track. It is very exciting to see. But that wasn't the most exciting thing that happened yesterday. What was the most exciting was just seeing her spar back and forth with these lunatic reporters. In fact, if you watched the press conference like I did, I don't know if you could hear it, but at the end of the press conference when she started going off, you had the usual barrage of questions. And you could tell that the mainstream media, the reporters there, were so frustrated because I don't know if you heard it, but I definitely heard on the live stream as she's walking out and they realize she's not taking any more questions. I just heard somebody under their breath very loudly just go F, the F-bomb. You know what I'm talking about. You know the word I'm referring to. You know one of the no words that you're not supposed to say on TV. Loud and clear. And you could tell They're frustrated because they know, one, their grip over the American people is loosening. Trust in mainstream media trust in the media in general is at an all-time low in this country. Nobody trusts the media. Nobody takes them seriously. Nobody thinks that they're the arbiters of truth that they want, and the government watchdogs that they once were. Nobody thinks that anymore. People trust Joe Rogan more than they trust somebody like Wolf Blitzer. Even Tucker Carlson, who was one of these mainstream media figures for a long time, after he got fired, he made the jump to the new media to doing his own independent podcast on X, like I'm doing here. I'm also on YouTube, and now I'm on Rumble. Oh, we have, there we go. Now I'm on Rumble. So if you don't follow me on Rumble, same tag as everything else, Jesse Hughes NC. Go give me a follow there. I don't know how much I'm going to use it, but I'm definitely going to stream on it because I've heard that, you can get some good traffic on there. So if you're joining me from Rumble, welcome to the show. Welcome to the Jesse Hughes Show. Good to have you. Thank you for joining. Hope this won't be your last time. I hope it's a good first time. I hope it won't be your last time. But it's interesting to see that all these big creators and the people that the creators that people trust the most, they're not on these mainstream platforms anymore. They're on platforms like X. They're making podcasts. They're doing live streams. They're putting out their own content, and it's doing way better everywhere. It's doing way better than the mainstream media. I mean, look at Trump's inauguration alone. Trump's inauguration had one of the lowest ratings in terms of TV viewership of any inauguration since they've been televised. Whereas on X, I think over 60 million views over various streams and the like. Mainstream media is dying. What I'm doing right here, what many of you who I'm friends with think about doing, are doing, this is the future. This is where we're headed in this country. Things like TikTok, things like YouTube, things like X, things like Spotify podcast. This is how information gets out. It's no longer the mainstream media pushing the narratives. We now have the ability, more so than ever after this announcement yesterday, to push our own narratives, to craft our own story, to share our own stories, to help get the truth out there. There's never been anything like this before. And honestly, it's great. I love it. I think it's great. But getting back to the press conference, some of the substance of the press conference was amazing. For example, I didn't have time to get the clips pulled up, to get the clips ready to go, but somebody was asking about whether there's going to be a focus on criminal illegal aliens, aka people that have committed crimes other than hopping the border, or if they're just a blanket over all illegal aliens. And Caroline Leavitt gave a fantastic answer that I wholeheartedly agree with, that if you have come into this country illegally and you have broken its laws, you're a criminal. They're all criminals. It doesn't matter who you are. If you're here illegally, you're a criminal. You need to go home. You need to go home. We are not allowing this any longer. We're not doing this any longer. We are not going to let illegals run rampant in our country. We're not going to let illegal aliens run rampant, control everything. It ends now. And we've seen that from the deportation numbers. They're starting to tick up. It was a slow start at first, and some people were criticizing, oh, if we keep up at this rate, then we'll never get all of them out of here. That is true. But I kept saying, it's the beginning of the new administration. They're still laying the groundwork on things. It's great they've gotten started. They need to ramp up the work, but give it time, guys. Give it time. Pause, slow down, take a breath. We live in a culture where instant gratification is the norm. If you're not instantly getting what you want, you think it's the worst thing ever. That's not how life works, all right? In our online spaces with our 60-second TikToks and our Instagram Reels and YouTube Shorts, we've been programmed to think that if you don't get instant gratification, then it's the end of the world. It's the end of history. That's not how it works, guys. Calm down. It's going to be okay. They're going to get them all out. They're starting to ramp things up, all right? Tom Homan is pushing for the numbers to go up. President Trump is pushing for the numbers to go up. It's going to get better, all right? Take a chill pill. Take a deep breath. Maybe go outside and touch some grass. It's going to be okay. They're going to get them out of here. Just be patient. Be patient. If we get like 6-7 months down the road and they're still only doing a couple thousand per day, then we might have some room to start voicing concerns and worrying. Right now, just be patient, guys. It's going to be okay. We are going to be okay. They're going to get them out. Just be patient. But lots to talk about from that press conference yesterday, including the fact that, in case you missed it, the Trump administration, Trump sent out a memo suggesting, and OMB has taken this guidance, the Office of Budget and Management, and they are announced that they're going to be pausing federal grants and loans in order to review what's going out, what we're paying for, what we're spending our money on, to see if it's actually worthwhile. Because I don't know if you checked. I checked this morning. We are 36 trillion, with a T, trillion, $36 trillion in debt right now. That's a lot of money. I don't know if we can be affording to send out money to all over the world right now, considering the fact that, we're $36 trillion in debt. We might need to, review and see what some of this stuff is going to. And immediately you saw the Democrats start putting out these attack lines saying that Medicaid, Medicare, SNAP benefits, Social Security, federal student loans, all these things were at risk. They started putting out these false narratives that they had been paused in certain places, and that's not true. OMB has said specifically, Caroline Leavitt said yesterday, it's written on paper. You can actually go and look and see that it's true that they did not pause these things. If you're on Medicare, you're fine. If you're getting student loans and that's the only way you can afford college, you're going to be okay. They're not pausing that stuff. Now, I will say, and this might be a controversial opinion, this might get me in a little bit of trouble, I think we should take a look at some of these things and decide whether or not this is prudent for the federal government to be spending money on. I will admit, in undergrad, I benefited from federal student loans because I knew that I was going into an occupation where I would actually be able to pay them back. At the same time, I don't think the federal government should be in the business of giving out loans to people. I had this conversation with somebody. When you look at it, when the federal student aid programs actually started, that's when college started to get more expensive. College has always been kind of this luxury thing that not everybody in the nation could afford, which honestly, if we're being honest, that's how it should be. Like, not everybody should go to college, okay? Not everybody should go to college. There are certain occupations where you should not go to college. If you want to be honestly, in my opinion, if you want to be anything outside of a advanced engineer, a doctor, a lawyer, or something in that realm, you probably shouldn't go to college. And even with some of those things, it might be more prudent to do like some sort of apprenticeship or trade school. I don't think that all of the people that are going to college right now should be in college. I mean, we all make fun of like the gender studies people that go and get this fake degree and then, they're in debt and they're begging the government to forgive it. I mean, even at Liberty, I love Liberty University. It is the greatest school on earth. If you are a parent, send your kid to Liberty. Tell them about Liberty. Get them to go to Liberty. I love Liberty. Even at Liberty, there's a major in undergrad that most students make fun of, I'm not going to lie, called coal. It's not coal mining. Coal is an acronym. And coal stands for Camp and Outdoor Adventure Leadership, where they teach you how to run a summer camp for youth groups. I love Liberty. If your goal in life is to run a summer camp for youth groups, you do not need a college degree for that. All right? You don't need to go to college for 4 years, rack up debt, just so that you can learn how to run a summer camp, which I feel like I don't really actually know anybody in the major, so I don't know what the success rate is. I haven't done research on it. But just on a hunch, I don't think many of the people that graduate from this program end up running summer camps. They probably end up doing something else. If you're going to college for something like that, you shouldn't be in college. Get a job at a summer camp, get an apprenticeship, learn how to do it from the people that have been doing it. Don't pay thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars to go to college to figure that out. Not everybody should go to college. Social Security is a flawed system. I'm never going to see a dime of it. You're probably not either. It was flawed from the beginning. I understand what the purpose of it was supposed to be. I'm not opposed to a similar program if it were to actually do the things that it says it's supposed to do. But you and I both know most of the time when the government puts out a program and says it's supposed to do X, it ends up doing C on the whole other side of the alphabet. It ends up doing something completely different. Social Security was intended, you put your money in, you let it sit, and when you retire, you get it back. You get back what you put in. And how did they start implementing it? By giving people money that they did not put into the system, that they got off the taxes of the people who were supposed to get the money that they put into the system, but because they're paying the taxes of someone else, now they're relying on someone else to pay the taxes for them to get their money, and on and on. It's broken. There are good arguments out there for why we should keep it. There are good arguments out there for why we should scrap it. There are good arguments out there for why we should privatize it, either partially or fully. There are arguments across the spectrum. I don't know what the solution is, but it's something that we should talk about and shouldn't be afraid to talk about. It's like if you've never heard this concept, there's this concept of the third rail in politics. Social Security is the third rail. It's like on a train track. The third rail is the electrified rail that helps the train keep moving. You touch that, you get electrocuted and die. You touch the third rail in politics, you get electrocuted, your political career's over. And that is what Social Security has been for a long time, and to an extent still is. I think we should be more willing to have these conversations because we're getting to the point where the system's going bankrupt. I'm not going to see any of it, so I'm open to talking about it. The people that are not open to talking about it are, ironically, some of the same people that are causing many of the other issues in our culture. I'm sure you know who I'm talking about. But, and, they're not all bad. They're not all bad. All right? I love older people. I respect my elders. They're not all bad. But some of them are very bad, and they have helped usher in the social decline that we are seeing. It's not all their fault, but when the sexual revolution happens under your watch and you don't do anything about it, when you're handed the greatest country in the world, the freest country in the world, with the greatest Christian culture in the world, and you let it go to waste, I'm sorry. I'm not a big fan of that, and hopefully my generation will be the one to undo some of that damage and get it back. But if we're not, then maybe our kids will do it. At least we can lay the groundwork. But moving on from that before I make people mad, probably madder than I already have, we have to be willing to have conversations about the things that we need to pause. And even, like some of the welfare benefits and stuff, the welfare system is extremely broken. It needs to be overhauled, if not completely scrapped and restarted. And obviously, the welfare system, how it's structured, is partially to blame for why the death of the nuclear family has occurred. Because when you're encouraging people, when you're using welfare to encourage people to have unprotected sex as much as possible, pop out as many babies as possible, all out of wedlock, and you get more money from welfare when you don't have the father in the home than if you did have the father in the home, you can see how that could incentivize some very irresponsible behavior. So we need to have these conversations about what we're scrapping. But one thing I think most of us can agree on is that it's utterly ridiculous that we are sending hundreds of thousands of dollars to fund condoms in Gaza. What? That is one of the things that Caroline Leavitt said yesterday during this press conference when they were pressing her on, no pun intended, when they were pressing her on the pause on these loans and grants. We're spending like $300,000 for condoms in Gaza. I'm gonna let the silence sit for a second, just for you to. I'll say it one more time. I'll let the silence sit so that you can soak this in. $300,000 for people in Gaza, halfway across the world, to have condoms. What are we doing? Who thought this was a good idea? I come from North Carolina. My state got hit by a hurricane a few months ago. There are parts of the state that are still not rebuilt, and we're sending money for condoms in Gaza. Shut it down. Shut it all down. Just stop sending money to anybody, anywhere, for a minute. Let's just calm down. And let's figure out what is actually prudent for us to be spending money on and what is a complete waste of time. Because most of these things like this, in my opinion, are complete waste of time. We're $36 trillion in debt. We've got people in our own country who are suffering. We've got all sorts of problems here at home. And we're sending money to Gaza for condoms. We're sending money to other countries for these ridiculous, crazy programs. Who looks at this? I really want to know, is it just stupidity, or are these people doing this willingly? Like, who is looking at a proposal that says, people in Gaza are in grave need of condoms. Let's use the money that we don't have here in the United States to send them some. What? I can't with these people. I cannot. I do not understand. I will never understand. I don't get it. And then you have, nope, that's not what I want to do. And then you have some other ridiculousness. We've got people freaking out over this, even though it's, pretty clear that we have no money to be spending. But you've got people like, I'm pulling up the tweet here. Let's see, wait for it to load. Let's see. You've got people like Rep Dan Goldman, who said Trump's freeze on all foreign aid is an abdication of our duty as a global leader. The money that fights AIDS, malaria, and famine, including in Sudan now. This indiscriminate freeze will cause more people to die. Like his blanket pardons, it's small-minded, dangerous, and harmful. Listen. I understand where you're coming from, sort of. But I feel for the people of South Sudan and the Sudan. And I feel for them in a special way because I know in South Sudan there's a lot of Christians that are getting murdered by Muslims every single minute as we speak. But how much money are we sending over there? A. B. How do we know that it's actually going to the things that it's supposed to be going to? Because, like, for example, Ukraine. We have no idea. We sent them billions and billions of dollars, tens of billions of dollars. I think we're up to like another 60 billion went over there recently. How do we know that they're actually spending it wisely? Why should we even be sending it to them at all? I really, no one has given me a good explanation for this. If somebody were to give me an actual logical explanation as to why I should care about some of these things, I would. But our politicians are incapable of doing that. They just give us these false platitudes about global leadership and democracy and this and that and such. And I'm like, first off, I don't necessarily know, especially with the state of the country right now, if the United States is really responsible enough to be a global leader. I know that sounds kind of crazy. I love America. Best nation in the world, in my opinion. But when our State Department is using foreign aid funding as a tool to force culturally conservative countries to accept transgenderism and same-sex marriage and all this madness, I don't think we should be doing that. We should not be the global leader. Now, if we were, it'd be one thing if A, we had the money to spend, and B, we were actually promoting values that made sense on the global stage. That would be one thing, and I could kind of, but the fact that we're forcing degeneracy on countries that don't want it in the name of democracy is ridiculous. Not to mention the fact we are not a democracy. We've never been a democracy. We shouldn't be a democracy. We were intended to be a constitutional republic. Huge difference. And democracy, every single time it has ever been tried, pure democracy on a national level fails. If you want to have a democracy in your hometown, great. It would work there. But when you have a democracy and you start expanding it to larger and larger and larger groups of people, that doesn't work. It usually leads to tyranny. And the fact of the matter is, the fact that we have started acting like we are a democracy and that we should be, and people have been governing as if it is, that's part of how we got into this situation. A lot of people might not understand how the 17th Amendment implicates some of this stuff, but the founding fathers set up the system where senators were originally elected by the state legislatures, because senators are not supposed to represent the people. That's the House of Representatives, who are closer knit, represent smaller groups of people. The House of Representatives is supposed to represent the people. And there are probably arguments to be made right now that we should actually be expanding the number of House seats that we have, because of, each congressman gets jurisdiction over what is it, 275,000 people? How are you supposed to represent 275,000 people as one person? There's arguments for expansion, but the senators were supposed to represent the interest of the states at large, not necessarily all the people, but the states. They were elected by the state legislatures. I think that was the way it was supposed to be. I think it works better that way. We've seen a lot of problems happen ever since it changed. I think it should go back. We should repeal the 17th Amendment. But going back to my original point, $300,000 for condoms in Gaza, using money to force people to accept degeneracy and same-sex marriage, forcing people, using this money in conflicts that most of our citizens don't even know where these countries are on a map and don't understand the context and the background and why the war is even happening. I'm sorry, looking at the state of our nation right now and where we are as a country, I don't think we should be funding most of this stuff. It is ridiculous. It is utterly insane. I don't get it. It's just not. It's not. It's not our jurisdiction. Now, a friend of mine did come up with an interesting idea the other day that I'm not necessarily opposed to. I would be more okay with us giving money to some of these countries that are fighting these conflicts if, in exchange for our military aid, we turn you into a vassal state of the United States. Take Ukraine, for example, or take any country, Ukraine versus Russia, South Sudan versus Sudan, Israel versus Palestine, any of these conflicts. If you want our help and you want to be given aid militarily, we'll give it to you on one condition. You become a territory of the United States. You are governed by us. You are not citizens. You do not have the same rights as citizens. You're a territory, and you pay us tribute. Sounds kind of like an empire. And there are two wolves inside of me fighting this idea. The I'm not really an isolationist as much as I am a non-interventionist, but like the non-interventionist in me is like, no, that's not our business, stay out of it. But the side of me that indulges in visions of grandeur and this like kind of likening of the idea of empire, I don't think empires may necessarily be the best idea, but it sounds cool. That part of me is like, this is the best idea ever. Yeah, we'll help you if you start paying us and start, if you are our foreign territory that we control, but you kind of do your own thing, but also you give us money. That would be kind of cool. But that's also how the American Revolution started, so I don't know if that's necessarily the best idea in the world, but, it's one to think about. It's one to think about, for sure. It's one to ponder. But right now we're broke. Right now we can't afford to help anybody, much less ourselves. So why are we still sending this money? The fact of the matter is, the idea of the Trump administration putting a pause on the spending and saying, we're going to review all this and see how much of it actually makes sense, that's a great idea. And I hope that they end up cutting a lot of it, because we cannot afford a lot of this stuff right now. I'm going to take a chair wine sip. If you've never had chair wine, go get you one. If you live outside of North or South Carolina and you don't know how to get chair wine, good news. I found out recently, Kroger sells it now. Any Kroger in the country that you want to go to, Chairwine available in cans or in bottles. Go get you some Chairwine. I love this stuff. It is great. I'm not sponsored, but I'd like to be. But yeah, so I completely forgot what I was going to talk about next. Trump signed an executive order recently calling for a ban on the mutilation of children, aka gender affirming care, that this trend that we're seeing going on. Except he didn't outright ban it. He just cut funding for it, which is a good start. And I've seen some people questioning why he didn't just outright ban it. Unfortunately, the president can only do so much with executive power. If we want to see this end, we need to have Congress step in and act. And I think it seems obvious to most people of common sense that if you are under 18 years old, you should not be getting these life-changing surgeries and these body-altering drugs just because you were duped into believing that you're a different gender than you actually are. That's what happens to a lot of these kids. You know, people will argue that, oh no, they're born with this feeling that they're in the wrong body, whatever. No. Most of the time it is social pressure coming from teachers in your schools, coming from people in the community, coming from friends, coming from online. Most of these kids, the reason that they think that they're quote unquote transgender is because they got pressured into feeling that way. And I think it should be obvious that we shouldn't be doing this. It should be obvious that we shouldn't be promoting this. It should be obvious that this is something that should be banned. But what should be even more obvious, in my opinion, and I think that banning it for minors is a great start, but what should be more obvious is just getting rid of this outright. In my head, there is no difference between a 6 or a 46-year-old claiming to be something that they're not. This is not something that should be socially tolerated for anybody. I don't think these kinds of surgeries and pills should be legal for anybody to get. This is insanity. If we lived in a proper country, this would not be tolerated, ever. But unfortunately, we live in an age of insanity right now. And so we see this happening over and over again. And I can hear the pushback from some of my more libertarian-minded friends of, well, if they're a legal adult, then what does it matter? What difference is it to you? Here's the thing. This doesn't just hurt the person that is undergoing it. This hurts society, because if we allow ourselves to live in a society that is confused as to even what a man is or a woman is, that's not a society that's going to succeed in the long term. 150, even 20 years ago, it was obvious. You didn't have to ask the question, what is a woman? Because it was obvious. The fact that it's not obvious anymore, and the fact that you have to have these debates over whether or not transgenderism should be acceptable for children, when for most of human history it wasn't even acceptable for adults, when you have to have these kind of arguments and debates, that is a very, very, very bad sign for the direction in which we are heading as a nation. This should not be tolerated. It is a mental illness that should be treated, and treated with care and love and respect. But it shouldn't be tolerated, and we shouldn't be allowing people to cut themselves and mutilate themselves and get these life-altering drugs that we don't even know half the time what they do. so that they can chase this delusion that they were born in the wrong body. It's insanity. We should not be tolerating this. I don't know how did we get to the point in this country where we're having a debate over whether or not this is something that's acceptable? What is, please, and to give credit to Michael Knowles, I think he gives a good point in a lot of this. When you look at the concept of a lot of this, it does kind of stem from feminism, because when you get to the idea that men and women are the same completely, they're completely interchangeable. A man can do the same things as a woman, and a woman can do the same things as a man in all circumstances. You can see where people would start to begin to think, well, if a man and a woman are completely the same, there's no difference whatsoever, then I can become a woman if I'm a man, because we're the same, right? So why can't I become one? It's a dark path that we're going down, and it needs to end. And it's going to involve rolling back a lot of things outside of just transgenderism that I think a lot of people in our current cultural context might be uncomfortable with. But sometimes, in order to do the right thing, you have to take very uncomfortable steps to get there. And it seems obvious to me, but maybe not to others. But we will see. Moving on into a little bit of a funner topic. I was supposed to talk about this last week. I completely whiffed on it, completely forgot. But in case you missed it, recently there was a little thing called the college football playoff. And for the first time in history, the college football playoff was expanded to 12 teams. It used to be 4. Before that, it used to be the BCS model, where you just got a computer generating who the top 25 were, and then the number 1 and number 2 teams in the country played in a bowl game, and that was your national championship. Probably not the worst system, if we're being honest, compared to what we've seen. Then it expanded to 4 teams. There was some outcry with that because the great and awesome and based Alabama Crimson Tide kept winning because they had the greatest coach of all time, Nick Saban. And so people were like, well, we need 12 teams. We need to expand it again so that we can get more teams in there. And so this year we got the first year of the expanded 12-team playoff, and it was disappointing, in my opinion. Very disappointing. It's always good to have more football, don't get me wrong, but these games were disappointing. Most of them were blowouts. Most of them, from the end of the first quarter, you had a good idea of who was going to win that game. If these are truly the 12 best teams in the country, that shouldn't be the case. It shouldn't be the case that we have, if the 12 best team, if they're truly the 12 best teams, there shouldn't be blowouts like this, but there are. I've always said I don't think that we should expand to 12. I've always said 8 seems like an acceptable number. Heck, keep it at 4. If we're going to expand it, 8. Let's do 8. That should be the max. I think that would work way better. But no, instead, we have got 12. And 12 is just too many, in my opinion. And I've seen a lot of people saying, oh no, this is great. Oh no, I love this. This has been awesome. Like, yeah, they were blowouts, but more football, man. This is great. It's good to have more football, but if they're all going to be boring games, why watch? If you know who the winner of the game is probably going to be before the first half even ends, what's the point of watching? And part of this has to do with a lot of other issues in college football, namely the unregulated nature of NIL and the transfer portal. I'm not saying those things are necessarily bad, but in their current state, there's a lot of things that could be done to fix them. When you combine that when you have that with programs who have millions of more dollars than other programs at the same divisional level, and you get to the point where there are only a few big dogs that have all the money, and there's no chance for a sleeper team to even come through, like in college basketball sometimes, because they can't even afford to get the good players to be able to do that. Like, everybody thought Boise State was going to have this magical run because Ashton Jeanty, which Ashton Jeanty was, in my opinion, the best running back in the nation. But you can't base an entire team off of one player. Yes, an entire one player can help elevate the team, but you got to have pieces around them to help too. And so when you have Ashton Jeanty, who's the greatest running back I've ever watched on a college football field outside of Derrick Henry, but you have an O-line that can't block and a quarterback that isn't that good, and wide receivers that aren't good at catching, and a defense that can't hold people back. You see where I'm going with this? Penn State is notorious for blowing these big games, but they manhandled Boise. When you have all the money and you're allowed to pay players, which is coming, House versus NCAA, schools, not just NIL collectives anymore, schools can now pay players. You're going to have a situation where it doesn't matter if you expanded it to 24 teams. It doesn't matter if you expanded it to 46 teams. It doesn't matter if you expanded it to over 100 teams in the playoff. You're going to have the same schools every year end up getting there. You're going to have the Ohio States and the Texases and the, hopefully, again, Alabamas and and the Michigans and all of this. You're going to have these same teams getting there every year. And it's going to get to this point where people are going to get tired of seeing the same teams popping up, and you're going to start hearing cries again for expansion, and they're going to expand, and then it's the same thing that's going to happen again and again and again and again. It's not going to work. It's not going to work in this current format. It's not going to work in this current climate of sports. It should have been kept at 4. If it was going to be expanded, the max should have been 8. Oh, but it's the first year. It's going to be better next year. We'll see. I doubt it, but we'll see. Who knows? Thank you guys so much for tuning in today. Thank you for joining. It's been a pleasure to spend this time with you. Make sure to follow me on X at JesseHughesNC. That is where I'm the most active. Make sure to follow, like this video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, follow me on Rumble. Share this with your friends. Tell them about the Jesse Hughes Show. Get them on board. We need to build a grand army here for my grand plans. But in all seriousness, I enjoy doing this. I hope you guys enjoy this. Apparently, there's 44 people that have nothing better to do than watch this live right now, and a few others who are going to listen back to this later. But if you enjoy this, truly, please like, share, subscribe, tell your friends about it. I hope to see you in the next one. God loves you, and so do I. Thank you, and have a great day.